Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here. We're going to talk about the four teams who were not playing in the SEC Big 12 Challenge as they were playing each other. Let's start 5 Central. Georgia invades Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt won a close one in Athens 2 weekends ago, but these teams have gone in very opposite directions since.
I'm sorry not to laugh here, but it's like you said Georgia invades Vanderbilt. I'm thinking like, man, this is I don't know if this is kind of the game that that matches the invade. Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe if it were football.
No, but it's like, well, I'm just thinking like, if this was like if this was Auburn and Kentucky, like Kentucky invading Auburn, I guess would be. But no, I mean, look,
maybe I should be more careful with my choice of words.
Well, look, and I was already laughing because if you watched our previous video, we had a discussion about
we're checked out already, aren't we?
I'm just like, our last video was very long, but we were also talking about Seinfeld and how, which SEC teams we would use as Seinfeld characters, and I think I was still just kind of reeling off of that. But
yeah.
Anyways, back to the important matters here.
Wait, are we saying? Never mind.
All
I'm
right.
I'm not sure this is the important matter, but anyway.
Georgia invades Vanderbilt. All right, let's talk about that one. I mean, Georgia. Listen. We've talked about this all year long, and these two teams have already played, right?
Yeah.
So if we go back to the game they played a couple weeks ago, Vanderbilt won that game. We talked about it going in. It's just kind of, Georgia is what Georgia is, and they are coming off this win against Alabama. What is the one we keep saying this, right? And it's like I think after that game against Alabama, people understand now that it's sort of like, Georgia is not as bad as their 6-14 record indicates. Now, I know that's crazy to think because they have been the worst team in the SEC all year long, but as we talked about, they have played some games, or they've been right there in some of the games they played. Even the ones that can be a little misleading, they've had their chances in the second half to at least make things interesting. But this is still one where it's like, man, if you're Vanderbilt, this feels like as must-win of a game as it gets because, you have already beaten them once, but you've lost, you've lost 5 of 6 in that stretch, right, where they started off winning at Arkansas, and now they've lost 5 of 6. Georgia's the only team they beat in there, and quite frankly, Vanderbilt just hasn't looked good in any of the games they played in those losses, right? Like they just haven't played well, and I'm not gonna lie to you, man, like that worries me a little bit about them in this game because you got a Georgia team that right now is playing with nothing to lose, and we kind of saw it against Alabama. Look, I mean, their season is what it is. Georgia's is pretty much a lost season at this point. I mean, obviously, it would be shocking to be an understatement to say that if they were to finish the SEC, outside of the bottom 4, if they were to somehow make a run like that. I don't see that happening with this team, but I also look at this game for Vanderbilt, and I'm thinking, this is absolute must win in every scenario. Not even like we're not talking NCAA tournament or anything. We're just talking from you mentioned on the last video, like from a psyche standpoint. Like this is not a game you can lose. I think they're going to win. I would pick Vanderbilt to win this game, but man, I'm looking at KenPom right now, and we don't know the number, but it's like 11.
11 that's not going to happen.
Chance.
Vanderbilt's not going to cover. I think this is almost as a toss-up as to who wins. Forget the 11.
I think the reason why I lean Vanderbilt here is, again, Georgia, there are 4 games in the SEC on the road. We talked about them, a little misleading, but at the same time, to a certain point, they've lost all those games by 16 points or more. And that includes the game at South Carolina, which, as we said, South Carolina's not a great team. So I would lean towards Vanderbilt here, but I think that number is a little high because I think of that group, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Auburn, South Carolina, as I said, they lost all those games in that, they lost Auburn by 23 on the road. But, I mean, again, anyone could do that. A lot of those games were kind of in that range of that 15, 16, 17-point mark. So, and again, these two teams have played each other before. And so it's like there's familiarity there. There's, film you can study off of that specific team versus watching them against another team. So I'm going to pick Vanderbilt, but that 11 just feels very high to me based on these two teams and kind of where they're at right now.
So you're going Vanderbilt to win straight up, but not to cover the 11.
Yeah,
11's the number.
I'd probably go Georgia because I would
too.
I just think that's high. And again, maybe that I think that number is because of what Georgia has done on the road. They haven't been great on the road. So, but yeah, I still think Vanderbilt's just not in a spot right now. Like we said, there's just not a whole lot to look at this team and feel confident about. Yeah, I think this will be a better game than maybe it looks on paper.
Okay, let me give you our audience some background on some things. Okay, Blake and I both live in the Nashville area. We've been to I don't even know how many games in that gym. I've been to several this year. The home court atmosphere there is become unrecognizable. That used to be maybe the biggest home court advantage in
Yeah.
college basketball. Vanderbilt is getting 3,000 to 4,000 of its fans in the building a night. That's whether it's Loyola of Chicago or Kentucky or Tennessee. They have increased prices on tickets. People got mad. They're not bought into the program. They quit showing up, and it's not even recognizable anymore. The product is not recognizable either. Vanderbilt built its team on shooters for 50 years plus, and they don't
Yeah.
have them on this team. I don't think people are thrilled with the product. If you saw Vandy Twitter the other night after Vanderbilt lost to South Carolina, what just was a disastrous last 10 minutes. They couldn't hang on to the ball. South Carolina put on a dunk show, and fans have just kind of had it. Jerry Stackhouse's support, first of all, there's just not a lot of fans that were engaged. The ones that still were, a lot of them had bought in. They are dropping off the bandwagon quickly. And I think it started to hit a crescendo after South Carolina. Twitter was not pretty that night towards them. And I don't think it was unfair. The other thing is you've got that. I'm starting to hear, I'm not going to say Jerry Stackhouse is in trouble, but I think if he loses this one, I think maybe you have a conversation about whether he's back next year. And I don't know how that goes, if that's just him saying, hey, this is a tougher job than I thought it would be. If that's an administration saying, hey, nobody's excited, nobody's showing up, you can't have that. I don't know what it looks like, but if they lose this one, he's going to have next to no support. And I look at Tom Crean, and the other night they win that game. They beat Alabama, and you've seen him do this a couple times, right? Like the first thing he does is he just goes over to whatever family members in the stands, hugs him, gets on the phone, calls somebody. And like he kind of looks to me like a guy who's resigned that he's not going to be back next year, so let's just make the best of it. The pressure's off. And maybe I'm reading too much into that. You got a bunch of players who are there to play basketball, and maybe that means nothing to them. But I just got two very different vibes around each program coming out of what we saw of their games this week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, again, I don't think many people, just based on the trajectory of the programs, I think that, certainly these are going to be two that are going to be discussed a lot depending on how the season ends. And that's just kind of that's the name of the nature of the business at this point. I mean, that's just kind of what you expect, and you kind of know. And it goes back to the discussion we've had a lot just about the changing nature of the SEC itself, and because the stakes are as high as they've ever been. It just becomes way more important for everyone to feel like that we have to put a product out there that is going to give us a chance to be successful and or competitive. And unfortunately, for these two programs, they just haven't been able to do that over the past 4 or 5 years now, and it's just been much more of a challenge than it was before. And so, yeah, it's a big game for both teams, like I said. And obviously, we're not talking from an NCAA standpoint, but from just a program standpoint, like this is one of those games you can really win. And obviously, again, it doesn't do much for you on the resume or anything, but it gives you that boost of at least, all right, maybe we can do something here the rest of the way, and we can build off of whatever this is. So yeah, it is interesting to think about kind of where both of these are at right now. But I'll pick Vanderbilt. I I think it's a closer game than expected. And yeah, I don't know what else to say other than that.
Okay, South Carolina travels to Texas A&M. The Aggies are 7-point favorites on Ken Palm. That game tips off at 7:30 Central. Carolina's played better. Still, you don't know really night in, night out who's going to do what for them. Some nights Keyshawn Bryant pops up. Some night it's Jermaine Cousinard. Some nights it's James Reese V. In the past, it's been Chico Carter, although that's kind of faded. I said this after the LSU game. I really like the way A&M is playing. I think they've got athletes. And where Carolina gets you is turnovers, where A&M's not great. Carolina, if it's going to get offense, it's got to get them off turnovers and that kind of thing. But I think going on the road and trying to guard athletes, that might lend itself to fouls. I mean, that building in A&M has been pretty energized lately, too. I think that I'm shocked if A&M loses this game.
I think I have no doubt where I'm going with this game. I think this is a terrible matchup for South Carolina because South Carolina, worst in the SEC, ball handling, 332nd nationally in turnovers, 15.5 per game, and in a stat that will probably surprise some people if they haven't watched enough Texas A&M this year. We talk about how great LSU is on defense, right, and their ability to force mistakes. LSU and Texas A&M have the exact same amount of turnovers forced this year. Both have forced 367 turnovers this year in their 20 games each. They're both tied for sixth nationally in that category. So both are forcing about 18 and a half turnovers per game. And like we just talked about with South Carolina, they have shown no consistency on offense. They've shown no ability to sort of sustain that offensive excellence, except against, a Georgia or a Vanderbilt at times. I think this is a great spot for A&M. I just think that they are the kind of team that South Carolina does not want to play. And let's think about this too. This is an A&M team that really needs a win here. 4-0 start. They've lost 3 in a row. This is a great get-right spot. We always talk about those. I think that's exactly what this is for Texas A&M. I don't know what the line's going to be, but I hate this matchup for South Carolina.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe it's what we see from Frank Martin's teams from time to time, right? Where they just have one of those games that really shocks you and they come out and make that happen. But I don't see it. I think the only reason this game stays close probably is because, as we said, it's not like South Carolina. You know what you're going to get from South Carolina on a defensive level. These are two good defensive coaches with Frank Martin and Buzz Williams. But I just don't. Offensively, I don't see much of a path here for South Carolina unless they go against everything we've seen from them thus far this season, which is always a possibility. But why would I think that's going to happen based on what we've seen from them? I think it's a bad matchup.
Okay, that's it for our breakdown of games this weekend. We've got a special partnership with Action 24/7. Blake, tell folks about that.
Yep, in the description below, we got the link. Click on that link, use the code SOUTH14, and your first deposit with Action 24/7, they'll match up to $800. And so, yeah, use that to, if you want to bet on some of these games, you want to bet on the Big 12 SEC Challenge games, we've got all of those videos up as well on our channel. So, check out all those also.
He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. That helps us out a bunch, and we'll see you again soon.